I mean, people have been forced to become so much more resilient, right? Like the resilience of the Ukrainian people is absolutely astounding. And I mean, somebody who does want a more fast-paced sort of lifestyle, that wants a very metropolitan, city options to live in, it definitely wouldn't be the city for, or Sofia specifically wouldn't be the city for you.
Привit, and welcome to another episode of the Vodka Podcast with me, Conor Clyne. Today I have a special return guest to the New Europe experience. That is Alina McLeod. She is a Ukrainian-Canadian YouTuber who not only has been here documenting Ukraine before the invasion in 2022 and afterwards, but she's also traveled extensively in Asia and most recently in Southeast Asia. So we're going to do a comparison today with New Europe and Southeast Asia as an option for you so that you're better informed, to give you some food for thought about what might be the best fit. In particular, Alina is now based in Bulgaria. It's a country that I visited a couple of times, but I don't know so much about. So this will also be a good opportunity for me to dive a bit deeper into the country of Bulgaria with someone who's there on the ground, who's obviously an expert in living in different places. Alina, welcome back. Привет.
Good to be here. Good to see you.
So the last time we spoke, well, obviously we spoke in person, and this time it's a little bit more virtually since you're over there in Sofia and I'm here in Odessa. We were in Kyiv together. It was 2021. I went back to look, and actually the theme for that podcast, I'll put it somewhere on the card if people are watching, if they want to go and check it out, was about whether in 2021, a girl from Kyiv, a woman from Kyiv, would move to a small Canadian town. And obviously things have changed quite dramatically.
They certainly
have.
The
option between living in Kyiv in 2022 to 2026 is quite different. I guess the first thing I want to ask before we dive into the theme of Bulgaria, where you've now set yourself up, is how have things been in the last 4.5 years? How are things going?
I mean, it has certainly been a journey where I was basically a nomad, I guess, when we met and all up to the last 2 years. And while I absolutely loved that life, I got to see so many amazing places. I just felt that after a while, I really needed a home base. Like I needed somewhere that I could actually put my stuff and come home to and feel comfortable. So that's where this idea to move abroad really came about, and how Bulgaria eventually happened is to just have a more centrally located home base. So that's really been the biggest arc of the past 5 years for me. Okay,
so you have, I guess, can we say, evolved from being a nomad to actually having a fixed space, but still traveling quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
And documenting that in your channel.
I still travel. Like this past year was my first full year in Bulgaria, but half of it I was abroad. So by no means am I stopping traveling. It's just having a place to come home to.
Excellent. And I guess the first question most people who watch this are going to have is, probably where is Bulgaria, to be frank, but I like to think that my audience is a little bit more informed than the average YouTube viewer. So they probably know it's in Europe, they probably know it's in the, we'll say, Balkan region, I guess we can say, borders with Turkey, borders with Romania, borders with Greece, right? So what attracted you to Bulgaria in particular, as opposed to some of the other countries in the region which are a lot more marketed online, like say Poland? You know, we've gone to this phase where Poland has been so hyped up in the last few years, particularly on YouTube for relocation, for travel. A little bit the same with Romania, but I don't think there's that much content even about relocate to Bulgaria or spend a lot of time in the country. So what, I guess, piqued your interest in going to Sofia?
I mean, I came here for the first and only time before I moved here in 2020. And I just kept extending my stay while I was here because I was just so surprised with how much this country had to offer. I really liked the people. And then, of course, you know, in 2020 especially, prices were very, very reasonable for what you were getting. Being a part of the EU, being pretty business friendly, lower taxes in the EU. Like by the time I was actually thinking about where would be a home base, somewhere in Europe, because that was the main thing that I kind of knew from the get-go, is I wanted to be based in Europe. Bulgaria was a front runner from the get-go. And then the more research that I did and kind of weighing the particulars that I was looking for, it really was the clear choice.
Okay, so there seems to have been a slew of reasons that you went through assessing before you came to the conclusion, okay, I'm going to go for Sofia. And you checked it out also, so you had a little bit of a sense of the vibe on the ground before you decided to take the plunge.
Yes.
I'm quite intrigued by the tax benefits of setting yourself up in Bulgaria. I know, because I watched some of your content obviously as well on your channel, that you spoke quite extensively about that. But maybe you could just summarize what was the big attraction, especially because it's in the European Union and in the Schengen area.
Yeah, well, overall, I think it's maybe some people might argue with me on this, but I stand by it, that overall it's a fairly stable place to do business, like especially now that it's switched over to the euro, it's just a lot easier to do business, especially within the EU if you had that particular type of business. But even as someone who primarily makes their money, online from like brands and AdSense and all of that kind of stuff, it is pretty business friendly. As far as setting up an actual business, in my experience, was not at all that hard. Finding a good accountant that can do, your books and all the fees involved, in my opinion, are quite reasonable. And I don't think that can be said about a lot of countries in the EU, which at least for those aspects have a lot of bureaucracy. Like Bulgaria has its bureaucracy too, but as far as business, it's actually been pretty straightforward.
Okay, so you find it's an easy country to set yourself up in as being self-employed, I guess.
Yeah.
So you have some company structure, and the tax regime is quite attractive vis-a-vis the other options. So I guess some people are going to probably think, well, why set yourself up in the Eurozone, in the European Union, in the Schengen area, all things that Bulgaria is, when you could set yourself up maybe just outside it, maybe in Turkey, maybe in Serbia, maybe in Ukraine, maybe in Moldova. So what was for you maybe the attraction of actually being set up in the European Union?
Well, the stability, I guess, more than anything. Like, as much as I love Ukraine, and who knows, like maybe someday I would move my business there, because under, I think I don't know what it's called, entrepreneur kind of way, you can have quite low taxes in Ukraine too. But, just with their banks, and if I'm receiving anything in the local currency, and, all of those factors, especially when the war is still going on, I just don't trust it as much. And also one has to also be careful about double taxation agreements, because Canada, even though they do have double taxation agreements with a lot of places, it's not everywhere. So Georgia, for example, a country that I haven't been to yet, but I was considering because it kind of fit a few of the other boxes that I was looking at, I wouldn't do it because, it doesn't have a double taxation agreement with Canada, and it would be a little bit more messy.
Okay, that's interesting, because I also watch a lot of content from, we'll say, the sovereign man kind of relocation, get 10 residencies and 5 passports, which I don't really believe in. I think it's a little bit of a farce at this point, because there are also downsides to being a citizen or a resident of country. They really don't talk about those, especially in the days that, especially if you happen to be a man of military age. You want to think maybe a little bit twice about which countries, including Georgia, because it's obviously in a tricky geopolitical situation. But I haven't heard that you need to be a bit more careful of double taxation treaties, whether they exist or not, because the headline tax rate might look super attractive in one country, but of course, if it turns out you're going to get hit with your own country taxing afterwards, then it kind of defeats the purpose of it. Clearly, great. Taxation is obviously one element that goes into, and the ability to set up business, into making a relocation decision, or at least putting that part of your life in one country. What is it like in terms of value for money in everyday life or living in general in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria?
Well, I will say that price-wise, things have changed. You know, even in the year and almost a half that I've been here, there has been a change. And some people now blame that on, you know, the euro, but I'm not so sold on that because the lev has been pegged to the euro for a long time. But there's so many other reasons that prices have also gone up, like, you know, with the war in the Middle East and the price of oil going up, and, you know, they do have some sketchy practices when it comes to some of their like supermarket monopolies here in Bulgaria. Like groceries here are actually not that cheap. Like groceries here are more expensive than they are in Germany, which is ridiculous.
Wow. Yeah, I lived in Munich myself, and I don't remember the groceries being super cheap. Maybe not the most expensive in Europe. That's interesting because I would have thought with the climate in Bulgaria, it should be pretty similar to here. Maybe the soil isn't that famous black soil like we have in Ukraine, but I would have thought it was a good place for groceries in particular.
You would think that, but that's been one of the aspects that especially in recent months has gone up quite a bit. And, you know, lots of locals that I talk to also obviously complain about that. But I guess you could still say that as far as other factors are concerned, such as living in a EU capital city, like rent, even though it's still very high for locals if you're earning the average wage, obviously as someone who's working abroad and has a more Western sort of salary, you know, for me, it is quite reasonable. And then because Sofia has a really good public transit system, I don't have to have a car. I live right in the center. I can walk, so I don't really spend a lot on transport. And then same with internet, like their internet is actually very good here, very reasonably priced. So all in all, my expenses are very reasonable for living in a capital city in the EU, I would say.
Okay, I know that looking at it statistically, that Bulgaria, of the 27 EU member states, I think it has the lowest GDP per capita PPS, so that would then probably be reflected to a certain extent in the cost of living when you're someone who's not dependent on the local salary rate, obviously. That changes the dynamic, and if you have an attractive tax regime, if you go self-employed like you have, that would seem to indicate that it's definitely worth considering. Not going to be perhaps the cheapest place to live from what you're saying, but it's definitely on the lower scale in the European Union. And like, what is daily life like in Sofia? I mean, is it like I always feel with a lot of these channels that talk about low taxes and moving to this place, then yeah, but that's great, right? You might have more money left. And maybe unlike Dubai, at least the Dubai before this war, okay, Dubai was super expensive, so you really needed to make a lot of money to make it work for you tax-wise. But what is life like there? I mean, if it's a dump and it's boring, the locals are unfriendly, then, you know, is it really worth saving money on taxes and cost of living unless you're really going to get something else in exchange in terms of quality of life? What is it like on a daily basis? How would you describe it? I
mean, Sofia as a capital city definitely isn't that busy. Like, you know, it's not fast paced. There's not a lot going on compared to other, you know, capital cities. And not that I really know like too much about it, but as far as I've like heard from other people, like the nightlife here isn't like really, you know, intense either. So if you're somebody who's like really looking for that aspect, I don't think probably Sofia would be the place for you. But personally, somebody like myself wants a more chill place that's very safe, that also has beautiful nature like within the city, and then like also right outside my doorstep, like we have Vitosha Mountain where you can go hiking right outside the city or take a bus 2 hours to Bansko. Like I prefer to come home to a place that's much quieter and chill, because when I'm traveling, I'm usually in very busy, fast-paced places. So when I come home, I just want to relax. Okay, so you don't see it as maybe a big pulsating capital metropolis like say the Kyiv where we met up last time. No. If you're looking for like more vibrant go nightlife, Kyiv would be the better choice. Great. And you mentioned there Bansko, that's where there's a ski resort, right? Yes. Yeah, and it's a great ski resort. Yeah. So
I know Bulgaria also has a pretty popular seaside for a lot of tourism as well. You got Sunny Beach. I haven't been to the seaside personally. I've been to Sofia a couple of times. How does that factor in the quality of life? The fact that you can go skiing in the winter, something that's very attractive to me. Here in Ukraine, we have the Carpathians, for example. I don't know if you've been to the Carpathians in Ukraine. Yeah. Maybe you can do a little bit of a comparison with it. And also then the seaside, well, I'm here in Odessa, Mama. Yeah, obviously Sunny Beach and Varna are quite well known internationally in Bulgaria. How does it size up?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If you want more nightlife, if you want more events, then definitely the seaside in the summer is the place to go, because it gets very busy and there's a big influx of, lots of foreigners that go there over the summer. But of course, once it's winter time, things really die down. So yeah, that's a whole other aspect where in the winter time you can go to Bansko, you can ski, you can snowboard, and then in the summertime you can go to the Black Sea and have a great beach vacation. So that was also a very big draw for me when I was choosing a place, is having like a nice range of nature and like things to do in all seasons.
Excellent. So it's all very accessible, would you say, from Sofia itself?
Oh yeah, you just like take a train or a bus, like very inexpensive as well.
Okay, great. So it's good value for money. You got the mountains and the sea. And that's also something that's a little bit famed, maybe almost a myth. There are a few locations in the world where you can go skiing in the morning and then hit the beach, in the late afternoon, like Lebanon, for example, or some parts of Spain. So maybe it's just about doable from Sofia because you are quite close to the mountains. Maybe a little further down to Varna. Yeah. And then, how have you found it with local people in Sofia? You're obviously from Kyiv. If people don't know your backstory originally, but you grew up in Canada. And you speak Russian and some Ukrainian, as far as I remember. So should be similar enough-ish to Bulgarian, which is also a Slavic language. How have you found that kind of integration part of living in Sofia? Or is it a place that you really don't need to bother with learning the local language? There's a lot of other foreigners who are living there. What's the vibe like if you were to decide to, in your experience, relocate to Bulgaria?
I mean, the people were definitely one of the big reasons of why I chose to move here, because even in 2020, I found people to be very welcoming and I would say more open and friendly than Ukrainians. Not that Ukrainians aren't, friendly people, but generally they're a bit more closed off, especially to strangers. Whereas here in Bulgaria, even though, yeah, it's like Eastern Europe and people aren't, happy-go-lucky, chatting everybody up, but they're a bit more open and especially friendly if they know you're a foreigner and want to welcome you. Like when I first announced on my channel that I was moving to Bulgaria, I was shocked how many emails I got, like how many DMs I got of like locals being so kind and, saying if I had any questions, just message them, people inviting me to things like from the get-go. So for me, finding new friends and having a social life here has been substantially easier than I was initially expecting, because I moved here like knowing nobody in Sofia. I have some Bulgarian friends that live in other parts of the country or Bulgarians that live abroad, but I knew nobody in this city. And I would say within 2 months, I already had like a nice little circle of friends that I now still see regularly. So that aspect has been fantastic. And as far as the language, that is another reason of why I chose it, is because, they use the Cyrillic alphabet. The Bulgarians actually invented the Cyrillic alphabet that, the rest of us Eastern Europeans use. So yeah, reading and being able to communicate a little bit, because like Bulgarian is still quite different from, Russian or Ukrainian, but just having that background, I was already quite a ways ahead of the average, Westerner who moves here. But yeah, having said that, you still would have to take proper classes to learn to speak Bulgarian. But if you live in, like, let's say Sofia, Varna, Plovdiv, you can get by with English. It's of course recommended to learn the local language, but you can definitely get by with just English in the main kind of tourist areas.
Okay, so at least for when you arrive, you can probably use English with the intention
Oh, yeah.
to learn Bulgarian.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's actually pretty impressive what percentage, at least in my experience here in Sofia, of people who speak English. Like, and it's not just young people. Like, I'm actually quite impressed that people, 40, 50 plus still speak very good English.
Okay, so even the older people, do you find that they also speak Russian, the older people, because they were in the Warsaw Pact, I guess?
Yep.
So they
Yep.
probably had Russian.
Yeah, basically, I would say 50 plus would probably be the most likely to speak some Russian. Like, funny enough, like my realtor, like her Russian is amazing. Yeah, some people that I've met trying to do things with immigration or like, other places, because some of them, they like the older people, yeah, some of them either don't speak English or they say they don't speak English. So then Russian's obviously my next attempt of like, okay, well, I'm sorry, I don't speak Bulgarian yet. Do you by chance speak Russian? And then they'll be more open to speaking Russian than they are English.
Okay, so that's possibly not going to be a bonus for too many people, but if you happen to speak Russian,
Yeah.
if English fails, then you can throw up Ruski and they'll probably be enough. I found that was pretty similar in Serbia when I was there last, that if people told me they didn't speak English, then yeah, they seemed to almost always speak some Russian if that were the case. But yeah, if we were in the minority that I guess already speak Russian. Who would you say that, maybe in summary for Sofia in this part of the video, who do you think it's a good option for? You've already kind of alluded to the fact that it's a little bit quieter than maybe some other capital cities. And who do you think it's definitely not for? Like,
I would actually
maybe
say
you've seen
Sofia would be a great option for, yes, somebody who wants like still the amenities and having a great, international airport, being in the EU, but wants like a chill lifestyle. Anybody who wants that at any age. Or somebody who is looking for a more family-friendly place. Like, I would say Sofia is a very, family values, traditional values, like kind of place. And a lot of Bulgarians said that, the school system here is better than other parts of Bulgaria. So for somebody who was looking for that aspect, it'd also be a good choice.
Okay. Presumably that's the local school system in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Right? When you say that.
Well, they do actually have some private schools. I actually have a friend who works at, I guess they have a Canadian private school here. So there are international school options, but I have heard that they are more expensive than you'd expect, for Bulgaria. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I had classmates when I was studying for my international relations masters who were, one girl was from Bulgaria and she got to, I think, the German school in Sofia. So there's definitely, even back then, we're talking about 20 years ago, so there's probably a range of schools there. Would you say that in terms of infrastructure, that Bulgaria is, or definitely Sofia is pretty well developed compared to other cities in Europe, or do you think it's a bit of a laggard in terms of infrastructure? Because it is technically the country in the European Union with the lowest GDP per capita.
Yeah, it's definitely lagging. There's a lot of improvements that can be made about, road quality or, updating certain infrastructure. But having said that, especially like the public transit is pretty good. Not all of it is super fancy. Like the metro, I would say, is kind of the shining star. But yeah, some of the buses, some of the streetcars, they could use an update. But, it still works. You still get to where you need to go for a very reasonable price. But as far as, some of the buildings and some of the, just upkeep of the city could definitely be better.
Okay. And you mentioned that you still travel a lot, so as a base, how is Sofia for going to, say, other parts of Europe or maybe to other continents? Because obviously you've been in Asia quite a bit. So how is it in terms of connectivity internationally?
It's great. It's great. Like, that's one of the top reasons why I chose it for my particular case, is because when I was looking at even, Tirana in Albania or Thessaloniki in Greece or, anywhere in Georgia, like they just did not have the options that Sofia does. We have so many flights every single day and some to even kind of more, out of the way places a few times a week, and especially to Asia. Obviously, before the war, you could easily fly, to Dubai or, Turkey, I guess, would still be fine right now. And you can easily get basically anywhere with just like one connection or direct. So for that aspect, it's been great.
Okay, so it has a big modern international airport.
Yeah.
And you have plenty of connectivity in spite of, just in case someone's watching this in the future, we're referring to Operation Epic Fury in the Middle East at the moment, not to actually the war here in Odessa in Ukraine, the Russo-Ukrainian war we're talking about, whatever this conflict in the Middle East gets called in due course.
Yeah.
So as a final question on Bulgaria before we mix it up and come to discuss here where I am in Ukraine, who would you say Bulgaria absolutely not for? Don't, avoid it like the plague. Pick a different option. It's not going to be a good fit for you in 2026.
I mean, somebody who does want a more fast-paced sort of lifestyle, that wants a very metropolitan, city options to live in. It definitely wouldn't be the city or Sofia specifically wouldn't be the city for you. But also, I would say somebody who is on maybe a very low budget, because like I said, prices are, going up here as they are in many places. But a lot of people are saying with the way things are going, they don't know if it's as worth it as it used to be. So I would think you would have to have some personal reasons to choose to move here, whether it was, the people, the lifestyle, like the nature, or business reasons. You have to have something tying you to here, because otherwise there are so many other options nowadays that people can choose.
Very good. That's a great insight into life in Bulgaria in 2026. I'm also considering coming out there at some point, because it's been a few years since I've been back in Sofia. So you were born here in Ukraine before you moved. I think you were quite young when you moved to Saskatchewan in Canada, and you've been back since the invasion in 2022. You were at least in Kyiv, I saw in your videos. So how did it feel to come back to Ukraine, to Kyiv, with obviously since the 2022 invasion and everything that's going on?
I mean, it was difficult because as much as you feel like you can understand what's going on by, in my case, talking to my relatives, seeing pictures, seeing videos, it's not the same as actually being there in person and hearing the air raid sirens, seeing the damage the next day, and just feeling the energy of the people and just how much they have been through. You really can't get that across by watching the news or just talking to people from abroad. Like, going there is a very different experience.
Did you feel that the overall attitude of Ukrainians had changed noticeably since 2021, or you thought not really? It's just wartime mentality.
I mean, people have been forced to become so much more resilient, right? Like, the resilience of the Ukrainian people is absolutely astounding, and how they still do try and find, positive things to focus on, and in a way life goes on as normal, and people try and find joy where they can find it. But at the same time, like, you can just tell how tired people are, how much they want all of this to finally come to an end. So yeah, I would say the character of the people and the energy of Kyiv, where I mainly was, is quite different than it was before the war.
Okay, did it feel unsafe to you to be in Ukraine when you were there?
Yes and no. I mean, it really was a crazy, even first night that I got in. I was shocked that I slept through it. I guess I had turned my phone on airplane mode, and that blocked, the alert that there was an air raid siren. But also I was so exhausted after that train ride getting into the city that, yeah, I slept all through a night where it was actually a massive attack. And I guess 6 people, just in that first night I was there, died, many others injured. And, you know, because my family has been living there all through this, like, unless it's something really crazy, like they don't even get up either. They just, you know, sleep through the night, because otherwise, like, you wouldn't get any sleep, you know, because there was, while I was there was an air raid alert, I would say at least 2/3 of the nights.
So it's, from that point of view, a decision whether you're going to go down to a shelter and spend the night in a shelter, or you're just going to risk it and stay up above so you can try to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works out in my life. I basically sleep through the air alerts unless there's air defense going off or the explosions are very close, which wakes me up.
Yeah.
And then I realize, I need to go to the shelter.
Right. Yeah.
What do you think the media, I mean, the media is a very nebulous term anyways, it's not very precise because obviously we have lots of different types of media. Was there anything that struck you as not being so obvious when you get back to Ukraine? Because obviously you've been viewing it a lot from outside, the images. I know that you're also speaking with family members, maybe that gave you a better insight. Was there something that kind of struck you, okay, this is not what I was expecting when you got back, about the reality, what you might have seen on the screen versus what you actually experienced when you arrived?
I guess the biggest sort of contradiction is that the news we see is so focused on the absolute tragedies, right? Like, of course, as close as you get to the front line, that's where things are more serious. But they don't really touch on in the media the fact that in many parts of Ukraine, it is semi-normal. Like, Kyiv is a bit of a tricky place to be because being the capital, it's understandable that they would try and attack it as much as possible. But at the same time, yeah, life is going on as normal. Like, people are going to work, you know, kids are going to school, and everything is relatively normal when there's not an attack going on. And I think we don't really see that in the media, you know, because I don't know what kind of story they would really run about that. But at the end of the day,
it's not that interesting.
Yeah.
For people to see it.
Exactly. It's like, you know, even when COVID was happening, like, yes, they put all these restrictions on people, but people still have to find a way to, you know, make money or to have some kind of surgery or, you know, go on with their life in other ways. So life doesn't just come to a halt because all of these crazy things are happening.
Agreed. That is the reality here. But that's interesting for me to hear that it isn't so obvious from outside that, yeah, life is going on. Of course, it's different here in Kyiv and to a certain extent in Odessa. But for example, in Uzhhorod, Chernovtsi, these cities that are maybe mid-sized cities, they're not really that afflicted by the actual bombing or the attacks. It's a bit different here in Odessa and Kyiv, as you point out. But otherwise, I mean, I go to almost that. This is one thing that I noticed. I'm not sure if it's the same for you. But in Kyiv and in Odessa, almost all my favorite places, we'll say cafes, restaurants, okay, it's different for nightclubs because there's a curfew. They're nearly all the same, in the sense that very few of my old homes actually closed down. I think one closed down in Kyiv because it was, there was like a shakshuka place, and I guess they went back to Israel. Probably, as it turned out, that probably, you know, I followed them there anyways. But did you find that as well, that, you know, the places that you frequented in 2021, they were all kind of still there and still working, or had a lot of them closed down? Yeah,
more or less. Like, I would say that a lot of the businesses that I frequented when I was there before the war were still open, and surprisingly, there was even new businesses opening up. So I personally don't know, you know, the exact statistics of how many businesses have shut down because of the war, and, you know, how many have opened after, but it was surprising how lively it felt in Kyiv.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also here in Odessa. Actually, one of my favorite bars / clubs is actually making its summer opening. It's obviously a little bit early in the season. We're at the end of April. But yeah, it's a place I used to hang out in also prior to 2022. And, you know, it's the same, reasonably the same vibe, just starts earlier and closes earlier. That's kind of the main difference. I know that you also filmed with your mom, and she took, I guess, the unusual decision to relocate to Ukraine during the war. Maybe you could explain a little bit about how that came about. People are probably going to think that's like mad. But
Yeah.
if you could
Well, I mean,
enlighten us a little bit.
trust me, I thought it was mad too, but I mean, at the end of the day, she's an adult and, you know, she can make her own life choices. And in a way, like, other than the war, it makes so much sense. Like we knew for a long time, even before the war began, that she was most likely going to retire in Ukraine because the cost of living is so high in Canada, and, you know, pensions, especially because of the fact that she hasn't spent her whole life in Canada. You know, she moved in her 30s. You know, her pension wasn't going to be that big, definitely not enough to live on. Whereas in Ukraine, we already have, you know, a fully paid off large family apartment. She still has so many friends, like our family is still there. The cost of living is obviously substantially lower. So it was always a given that she was going to go back after she retired. But yeah, after turning 60 and with the war still going on, she just had a few events happen in her life, mainly health related, that restricted her being able to work, you know, as she did. So she decided that she would rather take the risk of living in Kyiv at this time instead of having to look for, you know, a new job, especially right now in Canada. You know, even for young people, it's extremely hard to find well-paying jobs, and, you know, the cost of living. She just felt like it was the better option for her. Okay,
interesting. So would you say the cost of living difference is like half? It's a third at the moment, a quarter?
Well, I mean, in her case, she's paying so little because they literally just have to pay utilities, and it's split between her and then her brother and his wife and stuff. So I think, I don't know, each of them are paying $50 for utilities. Her phone plan is $20. Groceries is maybe, I don't know, a couple $100 a month. Like, it's substantially lower than here in Bulgaria. And then, yeah, whatever else she wants to get. And we're in the city center, so she doesn't need any kind of transport either. So her expenses are extremely low for the quality of life that she has.
Very interesting. So even as a retiree, in spite of everything, in spite of this war, and we should point out that your mom was born in Ukraine. She's originally from Ukraine, right?
She's Russian. She was born in St. Petersburg, but she moved to Ukraine with her family when she was like 12 or 13. So most of her, you know, life she has spent in Ukraine versus Russia.
And she's a Canadian citizen, or how did that all work? And then she needed a visa to come back. Okay.
Yeah, and now Ukraine allows, you know, dual citizenship officially, right? So now she's golden.
Okay, so she can be both Ukrainian and Canadian, and it's not a problem. Clearly, becoming Russian as a citizen, not going to be possible.
No.
If you want to be Ukrainian in 2026,
yeah.
That's the big exception that I think most people understand the reasoning behind.
Yeah.
And so do you think other types of people should also consider moving to Ukraine? Your mother obviously grew up there to a certain extent, and obviously you have your family ties and you were born there, so it's a bit different when we're talking about our personal situations. Obviously, I decided to come back, but, you know, I'm also maybe a peculiar individual in terms of my circumstances. Do you think there's other types of people who should consider coming to Ukraine in spite of what's going on?
I don't know if I would really recommend it during the war, like unless you really have like a really good, you know, reason. You know, I don't know why you would personally. Like, it is just too big of a risk in my opinion, because there are so many other, you know, great budget-friendly places that aren't having air raid alerts, you know, go off most nights. For my mom, it obviously made sense because of the living situation, because of family, you know, because of language and all of those aspects. So in those kinds of circumstances, if you already have some kind of connection to Ukraine, or it really, there's some kind of business situation that makes sense for you, okay, fine. But if you're just somebody who's pretty open and pretty flexible about where you can live, I wouldn't recommend it during this time After the war, absolutely, but personally, I wouldn't recommend it right now because it's also very hard to get in and out of, right? Like that's the reason why I wouldn't think of living there right now, because without any functioning airports, you more or less need to go on a 18, 19-hour train ride to some kind of, outside city and then fly out from there. And that's just too much hassle, in my opinion.
So you flew into Warsaw, or how did you get to Kyiv last time?
How did I get there? I went to Budapest. And then, took the train.
You took the train. It goes through Mukacheva, I guess, in Zakarpatska Oblast first, Zakarpattia, and then across. So it's quite a long trek. Yeah, in terms of getting in, Odessa's a lot easier because the airport in Chisinau is 4-hour bus ride.
Yeah, that's
from
nice.
Here in the regular
that's true.
So
that would be easier.
But yeah, it's a question that comes up a lot with clients who do decide to come to Ukraine. They're obviously not the bulk of my clients, since 2022. But for example, guys that have a significant other who's Ukrainian, they come back, they still get residency, they invest in property because they see that as the long-term prospect. And a lot of them, they do go to Kyiv, and then they have this long trek to make from Warsaw. Either they take the train or they take the bus. I normally recommend that they stop in Lviv if they have the time and overnight there, because I love Lviv anyways, and that's what I do personally. I don't want to travel all the way from Odessa to Warsaw. That takes 24 hours by bus. So definitely if you're going to Kyiv, I would agree. I think it's pretty difficult in terms of the travel if you need to leave and come back in quite a bit. On the other hand, if you're here in Odessa, it's not that big an inconvenience. You go to the airport in Chisinau. Or if you're living in Chernovtsi, which is on the border, or if you're living in Lviv, you're not that far from Warsaw. At the end of the day, it's not super far. It's not super convenient either, but it's a little bit of a different story. So we touched a little bit on what was going to be my next question, which is whether you would come back to live in Ukraine now or in the future. So how do you feel in 2026? Because you're now set up in Bulgaria.
Definitely a good chance in the future, unless I really had some kind of big problem with here in Bulgaria. I don't see myself doing that anytime soon because, I just set up my business. I just got everything kind of situated and I do like it. Of course, there's aspects that aren't my favorite and that maybe I probably don't see myself living in Bulgaria forever, long term. But for the time being, it's great. For the time being, I'm really enjoying my time here. But if the war was to end and if I was able to find some real estate, for a reasonable price in Kyiv, that's something that I've been thinking about for a long time, is buying my first property there, because even with the war and prices not actually going down, in my opinion, the prices are still fairly reasonable for how much Kyiv, has to offer. So for a first property purchase, it would make sense for me, because when I'm not there, I would Airbnb it and, have my mom, look after it when I'm not there and pay her a wage. So I could definitely see myself doing that in the future, but not while the war is going on.
Okay, so you'd look at it as a long-term investment, especially with the real estate prices being so attractive if we look at it on a European basis. So that's clear. Just to clarify for the viewers, the prices in Kyiv and also here in Odessa, they're pretty much the same as they were in 2021, which makes them remarkably good value if you're judging it vis-a-vis other European countries. But a lot of people have in their head that everything's a quarter the price in a fire sale. There was a period in 2020, late 2022, when that was the case. There were a lot of discounts, but then because some people moved from eastern Ukraine, in particular southern Ukraine, to Kyiv and Odessa, we've seen that the prices kind of stabilized, and they've actually gone up in Lviv and parts of western Ukraine, maybe 20-30%, which is not massive considering it's been almost 5 years. On the flip side, if you buy in Kharkiv or Zaporizhzhia or Dnipro, these are cities that are Poltava that are closer to where the fighting is, then the price of property has gone down quite a bit. So just depends. I do have one client, because he was here with me recently in Odessa, and his wife is from Zaporizhzhia, so they were looking there and he was amazed, which makes a lot of sense. It was not very expensive before the war, and now with the front line being not so far from the outskirts of the city, then clearly this is something to consider if you are thinking about real estate in the long term and risk. But for you, it'll be kind of probably post-war when you're sure that you would get to go back and live in peacetime in Ukraine, from what I gather.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Kyiv is the only place in Ukraine I'd really consider. Like, there's so many great cities depending on what you're looking for, but because my family's there, like, I'll for sure be purchasing there.
As a final question on Ukraine, do you think there's been maybe a change in how foreigners are perceived here? I know that's not maybe your own personal experience because you're basically a local when you're back here in Ukraine. And yeah, I also don't know for myself. Okay, I have an accent in both Ukrainian and Russian, but you know, I'm kind of integrated here. Do you think there's been kind of a more positive? Maybe you mentioned that Bulgarians are more open to foreigners in general than was your experience in Ukraine. What do you think? Do you think it's become a little bit more foreigner friendly in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that maybe it's even a little bit more positive because Ukrainians are almost like, you know, impressed that foreigners would come to Ukraine, you know, during this time. And obviously the foreigners, they are spending money in Ukraine, you know, they're helping the economy to a certain extent. And obviously it's assumed that if you're visiting Ukraine, then you're also politically supportive of it. So I think Ukrainians are overall like very positive and grateful to the foreigners that are visiting in this time.
So you see it as a big positive.
Yeah. Because I think, you know, like especially, you know, in the bigger cities, those Ukrainians are probably more open to, you know, really speaking to foreigners, because in the smaller centers, they probably wouldn't have as much knowledge of English. But in Kyiv, that's probably one of the best places to actually strike up conversations with locals and, you know, be able to kind of develop new friendships and stuff.
Okay, great. So if you do decide to come here, then expect an even more positive reaction from the locals than it might have been if you were here in 2021 or before.
Yeah,
I think that's a good way to close out on the Ukrainian section, because whilst it's not maybe what the vast majority of the viewers are going to be interested in, you went to my hometown of Galway in Ireland pretty recently and vlogged it, so I want to get your reaction on that.
Yeah, as far as Galway, I mean, what a charming, you know, city, and so well situated to so many beautiful natural attractions. And as with the rest of Ireland, I will say that people are lovely, like very hospitable, very friendly, like much more friendly than Eastern Europe, obviously.
Well, so that was going to be my next question. Compared to Bulgarians and Ukrainians, are Irish people still as friendly as they were famed for back in, say, my childhood, which is obviously a long time ago at this point? But a lot of foreigners who do move there do say that it's not as friendly as they thought it was going to be. So it's interesting to get your perspective, having visited, you know, my hometown pretty recently.
Oh, that's interesting. No, I mean, I guess it's just the luck of the draw of who you come across. But yeah, for me, it was extremely friendly people. You know, the customer service was great, because where was I coming from? Oh, I think I unfortunately didn't have the best experience in Montenegro this past summer when I went there on vacation with like customer service and just how friendly people were. So coming off the tail of that, I'm like, oh man, like this customer service is great. Like people are so nice and, you know, everything gets done properly. So for me, Irish people, yeah, we're super friendly and definitely more friendly to strangers than you would get here in Bulgaria or in Ukraine by a long shot.
Okay, awesome to hear that. I was there with Angela back in 2022, but it's a bit of a different situation because she was with me. So you know, she got a great reception. Obviously the war, it was in the early stages after the invasion as well, so people were quite empathetic. And would you ever consider moving to Ireland?
Nope. I'm sorry, but your weather, I can't handle it. I can't handle it. Like I was even there in what was supposed to be, you know, a good time of the year. I believe it was September. So it was still supposed to be quite sunny, not so much rain. And I had maybe I was there for 3 weeks. So maybe 4 or 5 days, yeah, were fantastic weather. And the rest were just like a mishmash of rain, wind, cold, like substantially colder than I was expecting. and very overcast. So as somebody who really relies on sunshine to feel good and wanting the temperature to be, still nice in September, I couldn't do it. I
agree entirely. It is one of the things that I really can't cope with, is the rain and the wind and lack of sunshine. That obviously it's very different here in Odessa. I still have the seaside like we have in Galway, but I have the nice weather all year round. Okay, great. So enough about my hometown. Just found it really cool that you actually went and vlogged in Galway recently. It brought back some memories for me. You actually spent a good amount of time in Asia because you worked as a model in Asia for many years. Maybe you could give us some insights about how that came to pass, how you ended up working in modeling and where you were based, and what was that experience like for you?
Sure. Well, I mean, that was quite a while ago. I first went to Japan when I was 15 years old, and now I'm 35, so 20 years ago. But I did model kind of on and off until I was 25, so that was my last trip there. And how it came about is that I initially, I had interest first in being a model. So I went to the one agency that we really had in Saskatchewan that was legit, and was able to get signed with them. And then from there, I went to a modeling convention, I guess you could call it, called Faces West in Vancouver, which has a lot of international scouts, from all over the world. And I was able to get scouted by a really prominent agency in Tokyo. So that was my first contract, and went there when I was 15 by myself. So it was a pretty life-changing experience.
Okay, pretty impressive. So you moved when you were 15, so you were still a teenager, obviously, and basically a child for, on the border when you moved to Japan. How would you consider in broad strokes like the difference between living in Asia overall as opposed to this part of Europe, shall we say?
Oh, it's night and day. I mean, it was the first time I had ever been to Asia, so the culture was, vastly different. And Tokyo was by far the biggest, most technologically advanced city I had ever been to. And especially then, there was not a lot of foreigners there. Like, you would get stared at, as an obvious foreigner. And there was a huge language barrier. And back then, that was before smartphones, that was before Google Translate, that was before Google Maps. So back then, my agency, if I had to go to a job or meet them somewhere, they would literally have to draw me paper maps of go to this station, but then walk 2 blocks and then go here. So it was a totally different time back then. But even now, even with all the advances that we have, I would still say it's very culturally different, and depending on the country in Asia that we're talking about, because it varies greatly. But even now, I wouldn't say Japan is that international as far as people living there, even though they've had to be because of their low birth rate problems. They have taken on more immigrants, but it's still very much a very nationalistic country. It's not super open to foreigners, and if you're going to live there, you have to integrate. Your life depends on it if you want to survive. Okay,
so Japan itself as an option is really for someone who's committed probably to living in Japan.
Yes.
If you want to go there. Did you have how would you describe your experience of being an international model? Was it positive overall? Was it negative? Feel about it in, reflecting on?
Well, luckily, I think Japan actually was the best place that I could have gone, especially at that age, because unfortunately some of the dangers and stereotypes about the modeling world are true, and especially at that age where you are naive and you are very, impressionable, and there are some really shady people in that business that will try and take advantage of basically children, because that's what they are. They're underage, they're not 18. So there is a lot of bad things that go on. But luckily, because I was with a really good agency, and also because, my parents, even though they didn't go with me, they were very supportive and gave me a credit card. So, modeling for me was never about having to earn money. It was just something that I was doing for fun. and just for the experience, whereas I know there was many other girls who were there because their families were literally relying on them to be able to have some kind of money to bring home because, you know, of the situation they were coming from. So my modeling experience was very different than that.
Okay, so you weren't in a particularly vulnerable position
No.
compared to maybe a lot of Ukrainian girls
Yes.
or Russian girls or Belarusians in particular who go modeling and, they end up, stuck in a room, all six of them, and it's kind of the big break and opportunity for them in terms of, making a lot of money relative to what they have back home. So that's good to hear. Since then, since you had your introduction to Asia when you were working as a model 20 odd years ago, you've been back recently to Southeast Asia, I see, and you've traveled extensively. How did that go? What is it like in 2026, 2025, 2026 going to countries in Southeast Asia and Asia in general?
Oh, it's great. I mean, like if I have two favorite regions of the world, it's Eastern Europe and it's Southeast Asia. Like those are the two regions where I feel very much at home, comfortable. The people are amazing, like very safe on a whole. So yeah, now even with all the political events going on, I would still say it's a very safe, very relaxed area of the world. Obviously there's local challenges, whether it's politically or infrastructure wise, but as a foreigner, you are in a privileged sort of position where usually that kind of stuff doesn't really affect you all that much. So, I wouldn't say that there's really anything to watch out for as far as traveling to Southeast Asia in this time.
Which countries have you visited in the last few years?
Oh, in the last few years, quite a bit, and some multiple times. I think I've been almost everywhere. I mean, I've been to Thailand multiple times. I've been to Vietnam multiple times, Malaysia, Cambodia, Laos, Singapore, Indonesia. Am I forgetting anywhere? I think like the only ones that I haven't really been to is like Myanmar and like Brunei, so everywhere else I've been.
Interestingly, I'm not an aficionado of Southeast Asia, but I've actually been to Myanmar. I had an ex-girlfriend from there.
Interesting.
It was Burmese, so I actually went. It's around 20 years ago. So I guess when you were modeling in Japan, I was in Burma/Myanmar. Would you say that for, like, obviously you've decided to locate yourself officially in Bulgaria, what would be some of the attractions for considering Southeast Asia over this region of Europe that I refer to as New Europe, so Bulgaria, Poland, New York, Baltics? What does Southeast Asia have, do you think, that this region Europe doesn't?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot. Why I always leave Eastern Europe in the winter? Like for me, there's really no good reason to stay in Eastern Europe in the winter unless you want to, I don't know, go to a few of the ski resorts. Otherwise, no, thank you. For sure, like the beaches, the very nice weather for half the year. The other half of the year when it's like so high humidity, extremely hot, chance of hurricanes, chance of volcanoes if you're in Indonesia or something. Oh, and Philippines. I guess I forgot to mention that I've been in the Philippines a couple times too. I basically would split up my time between the two when the weather's good for either. But I would also say the food is generally better in Southeast Asia, in my opinion. And I know that's probably bad coming from somebody who's Ukrainian, but I would say the food is overall better in Southeast Asia. And, as a foreigner, the people are definitely much kinder and more open. The customer service is better than in Eastern Europe. And also the shopping, as somebody who loves to shop, for sure, like their incredible mega malls and just the variety of things that you can get is much better than in Eastern Europe. Okay,
so there are some of the reasons. When you mention food, what kind of cuisine are you talking about? Why do you think it's better in Southeast Asia?
Well, I guess that would depend on, if you yourself like Asian food. So for me, like I love Thai food, I love Vietnamese food. So I really miss those dishes here in Eastern Europe because even though Sofia has improved with the kind of international restaurants they have, I still haven't found a lot of Asian specific sort of restaurants that are really good. Whereas in especially the major cities in Southeast Asia, like let's say Bangkok or Singapore, you can get everything. Like you can get every kind of international cuisine. It's all done very well. And of course, their kind of tropical produce like mangoes and pineapples and all of that kind of stuff. Like it's the best in the world. Like you can't buy that kind of fruit in Eastern Europe.
Okay, sounds maybe a bit similar to Latin America in that sense, would you say, or am I?
Kind of. Unfortunately, I would say that with the not so extensive experience that I've had in Latin America, other than, yes, the fruits are great in Latin America, but I didn't love, the local food as much there. And I wouldn't say their international food scene was that good either. So.
Okay, that's interesting. The international cuisine, it's pretty good in a lot of these cities in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Which of the countries would you recommend for relocation? We already split out that maybe when it's super humid and hot in Asia, it's better to be back in Europe.
Yes.
So you could actually just split your time between the two. And then when it's winter here, go to Southeast Asia. What would be your favorite places and where would you recommend?
I mean, personally, if I was to live in Southeast Asia, it would be in Bangkok, just because it's such a great hub. You can get to so many different places. The city itself, I personally really like, even though I'm sure some people would say it's a bit chaotic, but it still has all these different, pockets depending on what you're looking for. It has incredible amenities. It's super convenient. And, Thai people are just some of the most lovely people in the world. So Thailand would be my personal first choice. But I guess if you were somebody who was more business focused, Singapore or Kuala Lumpur within Malaysia would definitely be a great option as far as, business and taxes. I know, Philippines is very popular for some people. And while I do love it, I would say, the infrastructure could really be a lot better. And, it doesn't have quite as many amenities and it's not quite as easy to travel as other countries. So personally, I wouldn't choose to live there. But yeah, I would say the top three for me would be Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore probably. Vietnam is great too, but it can actually be much harder to move to. So that's why I wouldn't choose it.
Okay, because that's what was going to be my follow-up question. Is it relatively easy to get a visa to stay there? Because you mentioned Kuala Lumpur and Malaysia, it seems maybe the best or the easiest. Is that an issue if you wanted to be in these countries longer than the visa-free and having to hop between the different countries?
Yeah, it depends on your particular case. And if you're working online or if you actually want to do something in the local community, that will vary your options greatly. Thailand, as far as I know, would be the easiest place, especially with the DTV that they came out with, I think 2 years ago now. That is by far the most clear-cut, very open sort of visa that I think a lot of people could qualify for a fairly reasonable price. Malaysia and Singapore especially would be huge investments. Those would be very business-centric people who have a much bigger budget. But if you were somebody who was on a lower budget and wants a lower cost of living, Cambodia, even the Philippines, for sure, is a great option for retirees and stuff. Those have a much lower threshold of what you need to do to be able to get a long-term visa.
Okay, so there are some decent options also for staying longer than a holiday trip.
Yeah.
In terms of value for money, do you think it's better value for money in the countries you mentioned, Southeast Asia, than it would be in Bulgaria or Poland, Romania, here in Ukraine? Where does it fit in?
For sure in Southeast Asia. I mainly chose Europe because of, proximity to my family, the much better weather year-round, and just wanting to be in Europe, for the lifestyle as well, being able to, jump to other countries fairly easily. But value for money for sure is better in Southeast Asia, at least at this point in time. Specifically, actually, even though, like I said, it's a bit hard to get residency there as far as I know, but Vietnam is the best value for money in Southeast Asia, in my opinion, because, Thailand, as great as it is, it's gone up in price quite a bit because there's so many people moving there. Whereas Vietnam, you can live very comfortably, and their infrastructure is all right, for the very low price that you're paying. So Vietnam would get my vote as the best value for money.
Okay, interesting. It's been something I've heard a lot about recently. Vietnam been promoted quite a bit. Where do you think that this part of Europe, New Europe, Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, where do you think that it has Southeast Asia beat to a certain extent, or you prefer things here? Because otherwise, why would you come back?
Well, yeah,
you just live all the time in Southeast Asia.
Well, for me, even though, of course, every country in Europe is very different, and that's kind of the great part about living in this region, is that you are so close to so many different countries, so many different cultures. The price of, plane tickets here, especially with the low-cost airlines, is crazy, like how low you can get flights to London or to France or something. Like even in Southeast Asia, I wouldn't say the flight prices are as low as what you can see here. So that was the top reason that I moved here, is because I am just like in this bubble of so many different options, so many interesting places to see, an hour or two flight away, that if you're traveling without luggage, you can get like a 20 euro, Ryanair flight. Like that's crazy for me. Like a taxi from downtown Toronto to the airport would cost like double that. Like coming from Canada, it's unheard of to be able to travel for such a reasonable price and have so many places at your doorstep. And then also, even though I said, the food is really good in Southeast Asia, but the, culinary options and, the amenities that Europe has to offer, because I'm looking at it as like a kind of whole continent, I think it just has so much to offer. Like living in Europe is just a very cosmopolitan sort of experience.
Okay, so you'd see it as, it seems like you'd prefer to kind of split your time between the two as a result.
I mean, if I'm
weather, lifestyle.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, like, if you're asking me, like, oh, would I spend the whole year in just Bulgaria? No. No, if I'm being honest, like, I love it. I love it as a home base, but would I be fully fulfilled living here full time? No. But to be fair, I don't think I've actually come across any places that I love that much that I would want to be there year round. But Bulgaria is a fantastic base to come home to, and, as a solo female or whatever, living here is very safe. It's very comfortable. So I think it's a great choice for me for the time being.
How would you say that relationships differ between Southeast Asia and Bulgaria, Ukraine, this region?
Well, I mean, if you're talking like more romantic relationships, right? Like those kind?
Yep.
Well, for sure, it's just very different culturally, right? And I would think it'd be very difficult for me moving there, trying to have a relationship with the local guys there. I don't think it would work, like all things considered, unless it was, a person who also was very well traveled, that, had their own business, and that didn't have very strong kind of family influence, because I don't think I would really fit the mold of, what some Asian parents would be looking for probably. Whereas here, in Eastern Europe, even though it too is far more traditional than Western Europe is, but it's still much more flexible, and you can find people from all different walks of life. And most people, in Europe have done quite a bit of traveling. So I think they are just more open-minded than they would be in like Southeast Asia or any other parts of Asia for that matter.
Okay, that's interesting. So you find probably culturally it would make it easier for having long-term relationships being in Europe, not necessarily even limiting yourself to Bulgaria or Ukraine, but just Europe in general, than it would be the case in Southeast Asia or
for sure.
Asia in general.
For sure.
Okay. When you were touching on the idea of being in Southeast Asia when the weather is bad here and vice versa, it's actually something I used to do a lot. I used to go to Brazil every European winter and spend a month there, and it's something I'm thinking of reactivating myself. I think I would probably take Latin America over Southeast Asia for the first attempt, but I may also go out to Southeast Asia at some point to do a little bit of a comparison and to experience it once again for myself. Where do you see yourself? Not the classical interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, but how do you think things are going to evolve for you? You have your channel, you've been documenting lots of different parts across the world. Where do you think you're going to go in the next season or two on your own YouTube channel, which will reflect where you're living, where you're based to a certain extent, I imagine?
You know what, it's hard to say, and if you asked me 5 years ago, I, at that age, had a much more clear-cut vision of like, this is how things are going to go, this is what I'm going to do. But, you know, as I've gotten older and realized that so many things happen in life that you really can't anticipate, and, you know, even world events, you can't really anticipate. So I try and keep, you know, my expectations and my plans somewhat flexible to what comes up. But as for things that I am, you know, trying to move towards, I would say that it would be having some kind of, you know, permanent home base, most likely in Kyiv once the war is over, like purchasing my first property and, you know, being able to turn it into an Airbnb when I'm not there. I think that would be something that would make a lot of sense, because I don't see myself, you know, settling down, so to say, probably anytime soon. But I would like to have a place that is actually mine, that, you know, I can call home, and that hopefully will appreciate over time. So yeah, I think that would be the biggest goal that I have for the next 5 years. But at the same time, maybe build some new streams of income when it comes to business, because of course, like, I'm probably not going to do YouTube forever, but for the time being, I still really love it, and it's still doing really well business-wise. So I will continue, you know, for the time being.
It seems like the long-term play is Ukraine. It's likely not.
Well, as a home base, because, you know, like, it's weird. In a weird way, I still wouldn't say, too, that Ukraine's going to be, like, my number one. I don't know where it's going to be, but, like, I have a feeling that there's going to be some other place that's going to come up for me that will end up being maybe my actual more permanent home. But Ukraine will always be a place that I come back to. It has been, you know, for the last, I mean, my whole life, I guess I've come back every 2 to 3 years. So for the time being, it's just the place that makes the most sense to invest in, considering I have family there and considering prices aren't completely outrageous. Yeah. So that's just, in the next 5 years, what I think I would probably do.
Yeah, obviously this depends a lot on the outcome of this war.
Yeah.
You know, looking 5-10 years outwards. But yeah, that's one of the things that I repeated like a mantra here, is that it's got the biggest upside in Europe, simply because, to a large extent, because of the war. If you invest, either you decide to do it now because you're more willing to take a risk, or you wait until the war is ended and then, you know, you can come. But of course, you'd lose the first mover advantage. And it's not just about real estate investment. It is one thing that I talk about increasingly here, also investing in different types of business here in Ukraine. There's just like a huge potential, especially when the country is going to go through a big phase of reconstruction. So there's going to be a big boom here economically, presumably, as soon as the fighting ends. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly when that's going to be yet, which is why we got the risk factor. But it's interesting to hear, after all the travels to all the different corners of the world, you still, I know as part of its emotional and family bonds, but you still see Ukraine as a place that you would invest in, and
absolutely,
yeah, maybe spend a lot of time in going forward. Excellent, Alina. I'll leave it at that. Of course, I'll link around your channel and some videos down below, and I look forward to seeing you here, maybe in Odessa, Mama, at some stage in the future. We'll probably meet up when you're in Kyiv as well, presumably in the next year or two. And Harna Večera.
Absolutely.
Sodesi. Have a great evening over there in Sofia. It was great to catch up once again, if just virtually, and see you very soon.
Thank you for having me.